What leadership traits did you have to, and how did you find that within yourself to say, okay, we're going to pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off. We lost a few players that year as well, and then in 2017 reach that peak.
One of my favourite sayings is sometimes you need to let the tide go out to see where all the rocks are, and that's kind of what 2016 did for us. I had put so much pressure on myself to be the best version of the Luke Hodges, Joel Selwoods, Nick Riewolds, Matthew Pavliches, Bob Murphys, and other leaders outside of the AFL world. That's what I thought being a great captain needed to look like. You know, sometimes taking a back seat is actually the best form of leadership in some situations, rather than thinking you need to have all the answers. But I also, you always hear about the Bloods culture with regards to the Swans, and one of the people that I thought was the most impressive performer was...
On further to Ali's point about captaincy, right? So you became a captain at a very, very young age, and you took the team from... I want to sort of pick your mind from a leadership perspective to say, okay, how do you transition a team that had its low in 2016 to the epitome of highs in 17? As a leader, what skills do you need to call on to be able to transition this group of young men and a club? Because as a captain, you carry even the club on your back as well. The coach leans on you for support. Players do as well. Management does as well. The fans, everybody buys into that. So what leadership traits did you have to, and how did you find that within yourself to say, okay, we're going to pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off. We lost a few players that year as well, and then in 2017 reach that peak?
Yeah, well, one of my favourite sayings is sometimes you need to let the tide go out to see where all the rocks are, and that's kind of what 2016 did for us. It gave us an opportunity to go, first and foremost, let's have a really good hard look at ourselves. And I'd been captain for 4 or 5 years at that stage, so a reasonable amount of time, but I had put so much pressure on myself to be the best version of the Luke Hodges, Joel Selwoods, Nick Riewolds, Matthew Pavliches, Bob Murphys, and other leaders outside of the AFL world. That's what I thought being a great captain needed to look like. But going on my own personal journey and understanding that, I personally had so much that I could offer this group, and it didn't require being anything extraordinary in areas that weren't my strengths. It was more just having a better understanding of who I was, how I love to lead, how I love to show up, and then just doing that became one. It required way less energy because it was just authentic.
Yep.
And it kind of gave other guys the opportunity to grow in areas that weren't my strengths, that I was probably kind of not restricting them, but just not empowering them in a way that what I think is now, or how I view good leadership. Sometimes taking a back seat is actually the best form of leadership in some situations, rather than thinking you need to have all the answers.
Yeah.
Speaking of leaders, when you were drafted, you were in the Terry Wallace era.
Yes.
How many other coaches were there after him? I can't even remember. There was Terry Wallace.
There was just Terry Wallace. Then we had Jade Rawlings was kind of the takeover or caretaker coach. And then Dimmer was, he came in, so 14 years with Dimmer. Yeah,
14 years. I want to understand, what was the difference between all the coaches? Because in my mind, back then I was a kid. So even till this day, I truly don't understand the impact of a coach.
Yeah.
Right? The differences of a coach. Can you break that down to us a little, like the differences that coaches make to a team? Yeah,
definitely. And I mean, again, it's kind of like that understanding of each coach, knowing what their strengths are, really dialing them up. So for me, from an experience point of view, like Terry Wallace was a brilliant coach. He understood the game. He saw trends like really quickly. But the challenge for him was that he, particularly in like 2008, for instance, we were the last team to beat Hawthorn before they went on to go and win the Premiership.
Okay.
But our game plan would literally change week by week depending on who we were playing. So like to be a young player in that side coming into training that week going, oh, hang on, wait, last week, we wanted to maintain possession and play a kick and catch game. Now we want to play try and get it to stoppage as much as we can and lock it in our forward half and set up defence behind the ball, is a really hard thing to do because there's no consistency in messaging. It can cause confusion, but it also can provide you with the opportunity to beat the best performing teams at the time because you have adapted to the way that they play effectively. What Dimmer did when he came in and was set it in stone, he's like, this is going to take time. We're going to spend lots of hours out on the footy field to really understand what I think is going to be Premiership type of footy. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to win a Premiership this year, next year, or in 3 or 4 years' time, but these are going to be the fundamentals to the way that and the system that we're going to play. And now that have adapted and changed and evolved over time. And, one of his greatest masterstrokes as a coach was implementing speed in our forward line with Daniel Rioli, Dan Butler, Jace Castagna.
The mosquito fleet.
Yeah.
Like surrounding them with the talent that we had in Jack Rewalt, who didn't have the speed that the other boys did, but incredible leader and managed to put them under his wing and really nurture them because of how young they were at the time. That was a masterstroke, but I think that was a big, back to the question around like what happened from 2016 to 2017. We didn't try and pigeonhole every single player. It wasn't like, well, this is the template of who we or how we want our Richmond players to look like. We actually have, this guy, this guy, this guy. Here are their strengths. And then we've got these guys over here who complement those strengths. And if we put them in a team together, we can build something around that. And that was where Dimmer really started to come into his own. Like, we aren't the prettiest and most talented from a skill set point of view team. So let's just create chaos and bring heat and energy and force teams to really genuinely just shit themselves and fumble the ball or cough it up or kick it back to our elite defensive structure behind the ball where we had so many great intercept players. Like, these are all the fundamentals that did evolve and change and adjust that not just Dimmer, but the coaching staff had to unveil and adapt. But back to coaching styles, like Dimmer's greatest strength as a coach was his storytelling ability. Like every week he would have a theme, there'd be a gift that you would receive as part of the pre-game presentation. Some weeks it'd be super random. You wouldn't understand why I had a hammer sitting on my jumper before I went to play. Other times might be, a team that he's spoken about in the NFL. So there'd be a Guernsey or a hat or something like that. So lots of different quirky things about Dimmer and the way that he did, but his ability to tell story and then make it relatable to the players was such an incredible strength. And I think you kind of see it now in his role. He's back to effectively the building blocks. And I know speaking to him, it's like there's a lot of hard work, but I am really enjoying being back and not having such a refined and defined way of doing things. We're still kind of finding our feet. We're implementing younger players. We've got some guys that have played well and truly over 100 games that are great contributors, but they've got to adjust their roles just to fit within what we think is going to be our best team. So, yeah, stuff being a coach, effectively, is what I'm saying. Yeah, I've got no interest.
You have no interest?
No interest in coaching.
You're saying that now, 10 years later, you're like half full.
They all come back.
Just on the box, just coaching something.
The next Michael Voss.
Nah, not for me.
Yeah.
Well, what do you want to do then if you're not going to coach? Well, there was a photo of you in a Brisbane jumper or something. What was that?
Yeah, so I've been helping the Brisbane boys and coaches with
coaching,
a bit of leadership. I would say I'm a leadership consultant.
Right.
But effectively, like, I was very fortunate in being introduced to a guy called Ben Crow as a life or leadership coach at the end of 2016. And effectively, the way that I see what his role was for me, and as much as he is brilliant and I'm underselling how amazing he is, he was like your guiding light that was standing there and allowing you to actually realise all the good that you have within you. And that's kind of what he did for me. Yes, he had some exercises that we did and started to drag all that sort of stuff out. And that's kind of how I see my role with the Brisbane boys. Like, they've got so much talent. They've obviously had a really successful period over the last 5 or 6 years since Fags has been up there. But, I just want to help them realise just how good a leaders they can be by instilling some of the learnings.
A Brisbane fan now? Like, who do you support now?
I still love Richmond and the Tigers. And that will never go away for me. But I'm also passionate about helping others realise their potential. And
you go for Brisbane now. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, it makes the job better when they're winning, yes, 100%.
As a player, do you ever suffer from sort of envying what other teams have? So let's say, for example, at Richmond, you might say, I like their facilities more somewhere else. Or I prefer... I'd love to work under or play under that celebrity coach or whatever it is. Did you ever feel that as a player? And who did you look at and say, look, I wouldn't mind sort of mimicking what they have? Or
good question. Probably the Cats, and that was for two reasons. I grew up barracking for Geelong, and I didn't beat them, or we didn't beat them, for the first 10 years of my career. So there was always, and I played them in my first game as well. So there was always this underlying clearly a very successful club for a long period of time. So to beat them in the qualifying final in 2017 was like one of the greatest games in my experience. The other one would probably be Sydney Swans. One, because of, again, their continued success and ability to kind of bounce back. They'll have their down or off year, then they'll really come back. And, this year, for example, is just incredible to see what they've managed to do on the back of a disappointing result 2 years ago. But I also, you always hear about the Bloods culture with regards to the Swans. And, one of the people that I thought was the most impressive performer was Brett Kirk. And, he was the captain, tagged me a couple of times, did a number on me, but he had the ultimate respect from his teammates. Like the times that you would get out, and this is when I was younger and could run, and you finally got rid of him, there'd be one of his teammates right there just playing on you just because they knew that it would help him and get his job done, which would also help the team. So there was that element of the Bloods culture that I always was like, God, why is it so unique and different to everything else? And I think, walking away from the game and realising what we did manage to create at Richmond, it certainly felt as though lots of people were trying to emulate, the connection and the love that Richmond had really started to own as their form of culture and what had allowed us to be successful over a few years.